10th episode of the first series, James and the Express, based on the story of the same name from the Railway series but James the Red Engine, is the conclusion to the James saga in the first series. Although James has made a good impression on the Fat Controller after his success with some trucks, he still finds himself the subject to teasing by Gordon and Henry, who consistently reminded him of how a bootlace was needed to help him finish a journey with the coaches. James tries to counter their insults, reminding them of getting shut up in a tunnel and stuck on a hill, but neither of them let up. Gordon boasts about being the only engine capable of pulling the Express alone, claiming that he has never lost his way and knows the line by instinct, forgetting that it is the signalman who ensures that engines do not get lost. The next morning, James and Gordon prepare for work. Gordon once again gloats about getting to pull the Express while James is left with odd jobs before sending the Red Engine off to fetch his coaches. James, now knowing to be extra careful with the coaches, takes them nicely into the station. He tells the coaches that he would love to be able to take the Express, before leaving them for Gordon, who couples himself up to the train as noisily as importantly as possible. Gordon then leaves with his train, full of passengers, one of them being the Fat Controller, among other important people. James waits until the Express is gone, then he goes back to work shunting trucks and fetching coaches for another train. Later, James has brought the next train's coaches to the platform when Gordon, looking very sheepish, quietly pulls into the station, trying to not be noticed. James asks if Gordon lost his way, and Gordon admits that he was mistakenly switched off the main line and forced onto the loop back to the station. James finds it funny, of course. However, the passengers are furious and demand refunds, but the Fat Controller calls their attention and promises them a new train immediately. With Gordon unable to pull the Express again, and no other engines available, the Fat Controller asks James if he will take the train. The Red Engine is more than happy and quickly couples up. The Fat Controller wishes James luck and he pulls out at the station. The journey goes without incident, and upon reaching their destination, the passengers thank James for a nice journey. The Fat Controller is very impressed and asks James if he would like to pull the Express sometimes. James excitedly says yes at once. The next day, James sees Gordon shunting trucks. The larger engine is enjoying simpler work and getting to teach the trucks some manners. He then congratulates James on his success with the Express. Gordon and James soon become good friends, with James sometimes taking the Express to allow Gordon to rest. Gordon no longer talks about bootlaces, and the two very much agree when it comes to their opinion of trucks. This was a really lovely wrap-up to the James saga in this first series, and we get to see him develop his personality and his bond with Gordon. First, it starts off as a rivalry, with Gordon being the boastful one and James being a hard worker who's keen to please. But then Gordon realising his mistakes, and the two eventually become friends. And this is another one of those instances where Gordon's boastfulness and gloating comes back to bite him on the ass. If he had an ass, that is. But you know what I mean. And this shows off another side of James's personality. How he can be sarcastic and really funny. I especially love the teasing he gives Gordon when he comes back to the station from pulling the Express.
"Hello, Gordon. Is it tomorrow?" asked James. Gordon didn't answer. He just let off steam feebly. "Did you lose your way, Gordon?" said James. "No, it was lost for me. I was switched off the main line onto the loop. I had to go all round and back again. Perhaps it was instinct," said James.
That gets me every time. It was a really nice wrap-up for James's story in the first series, and showing him being fully in the Fat Controller's good books. Well, until he makes another accident, but we'll get to that when we get to that. This is another one of those episodes I have a lot of fond memories of watching, partly because this was the second episode of the first series I watched on the VHS tape in Troublesome Trucks and Other Stories. And if you've gone through the years without watching this episode for a while, I definitely recommend checking it out. But I would highly recommend starting with James and the coaches and then working your way up to this episode. It's a fun trilogy from one of my favourite characters, and I always look forward to watching it every time I put it on DVD. And after this episode ends, we will be rejoining a little blue tank engine for his further adventures. But we'll get to that tomorrow.